A new episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars' final season is out, and with that, we've got a new video for you. As this video will be relating to elements of that episode, we highly recommend you watch that episode first. There will be spoilers ahead. We'd all like to pretend that bad writing and Star Wars The Clone Wars are mutually exclusive, but the truth is they're not, and never have been. The Clone Wars has had its fair share of misses. The flaws we'll be discussing today, for example, pale in comparison to the nightmare that was the D-Squad arc. But that doesn't mean those flaws don't exist, and it's about time that we address the elephant in the room. Trace, Ahsoka's new friend from the most recent arc, is a frickin' terrible character. Now, before we get into why, we would just like to say that we really don't hate this arc. It's not bad, even if it's an odd choice to fill one of these arc slots we have for the final season, but it's not exactly on Bara either. From the way certain people have been reacting, you'd think this arc was an all-time low, but the uncomfortable truth is that it isn't. The Clone Wars was a great show, but it still had its failings, and in all honesty, our nostalgia has kinda swept them under the rug. The most recent arc is mid-tier when it comes to Clone Wars, not quite on Bara and not quite like D-Squad. The problem is that people have forgotten D-Squad, have forgotten the show's failings in a nostalgic focus of where the show excelled, and it's led to an excess of harshness. Yes, Trace is a bad character, but so are Whack 47, Garnak, and those Mandalorian teenagers from that one arc. If you're looking for a show that only has good characters, go watch Battlestar Galactica instead. So, with that perspective in mind, let's take a look at Trace. Trace Martez was cast in the mold of a young, naive underworld mechanic, easily manipulated by her older sister Rafa. Though she's not that bright, she's cheery and becomes fast friends with Ahsoka when the two get mixed up with each other. But her character has several glaring problems. She's way too naive for an underworld orphan, and more importantly, she's a complete idiot. She's way too much like Ezra Bridger, who arguably was one of the greatest downsides of Rebels for how annoying he was. Interestingly enough, Trace wasn't part of the original plan for this arc. In case you didn't know, none of the episodes we're getting in Season 7 are new. The whole show up to the Siege of Mandalore had either been written or was being written when the Clone Wars was cancelled. But while the story we're getting in this arc is mostly the same one that was written before Disney came along, the characters are not. Trace and Rafa Martez are new. Originally, their role was going to be played by a guy called Nix Okami, who, according to Filoni, was created to be the Clone Wars' first major Asian lead.
Okami! Do you have what you owe me?
Hey, Petrou. I was just coming to see you. I've been helping a new client rebuild her speeder. I was waiting for her to pay me the last few credits she owed me.
So, where's my money?
I'm a few credits short.
Then this is going to hurt pretty bad, Okami.
Well, the question is, will it hurt me or you?
You're doing pretty good.
You can go get help anytime you want, Ahsoka.
But only if you let me stay free of charge.
Free? No way! Fine, free of charge. Just go get help. Oh, that hurt.
I think you want to leave now.
Tell Okami his debts are far from being paid.
Now, by the looks of things, Okami probably would have been more or less as bad as Trace is. You don't get too much from that clip, but he does come off as about as stupid, if a bit less naive than Trace is. He's also more of a Han Solo than an Ezra Bridger, but he still doesn't come off as all that intelligent. Though, admittedly, we know very little about what he would have been like. But what we do know is actually fairly important, and it explains some of the contradictions in Trace's character. See, the problem with Trace boils down to her being unrealistically stupid. That's really it. Everything else stems from that. She's supposed to have grown up in the Coruscant underworld, on level 1313 no less, but she doesn't act like it. She's gullible, she's way too trusting of Ahsoka, and above all, she's naive as hell. And her sister doesn't exactly shelter her or anything, so she really has no reason to be that way. For someone who grew up in the underworld, she's thoroughly unprepared for all underworld stuff she gets involved in. But there's actually a reason for this. Let's look at some of her worst moments of stupidity and see if we can plot it out. First things first, we have the moment in the second episode in which she dumps a shipment of spice right into hyperspace. There is absolutely no good reason for her to do this, of course, and the scene itself should make anybody cringe. As soon as Trace hears that the business they're involved in could pose a danger to her ship, she starts tuning everything else out, and like a child, she dumps everything into hyperspace without thinking at all. Moving on to the most recent episode, well, where do we even begin? She talks back to the Pike guards and even pushes one of them, earning herself some much-deserved torture that, through dumb luck, she escapes. The escape grants her blaster, but instead of being smart and proceeding with caution, she charges through the prison block screaming her head off, though it should be said she takes out a fair few Pike guards in the process. Later in the episode, she contributes to the group getting captured again by getting fixated on retrieving her ship and stalling them. So yeah, Trace is stupid. Whether you want to class that as a doesn't think first kind of stupid or a not completely there kind of stupid is up to you. But there's actually a reason for her idiocy. Her character was developed as an idiot on purpose. Why? Because it was necessary for the writing. If you look at all the moments we cited above, they all have a common theme that you might have missed. They're all necessary to move the plot forward. If Trace hadn't dumped the spice, there would have been no good reason for the gang to end up in a Pike prison. If she hadn't been aggressive with the guards, she wouldn't have been able to escape, and as her escape was the catalyst for Ahsoka's escape, it would be necessary for that to happen too. Her blind charge through the prison was also necessary to prompt Ahsoka to break her and rough her out, and to bring the group back together. And lastly, her fixation on the lamely named Silver Angel helped get the group back in prison for the end of the episode. If you bring Okami into this story, things start to make a lot more sense. From the clip we showed earlier, it's clear that he's far more of a scoundrel than Trace or Rafa. It's a fair bet that in the original script for the second episode, he wasn't supposed to have dumped the spice and was intending to scam people to begin with or something like that. In the original script for the third, he likely would have made his escape during his initial torture session, and the episode would have played out from there. Trace's awful character likely came about because when her and Rafa were inserted into the story in place of Okami, these things no longer worked. For all her flaws, Rafa would never bring her sister in on a scam, especially not an expensive one involving the Pikes, and so the writers needed to ditch the spice another way. Trace's stupidity came about to compensate for the lack of Okami's scumbaggery, as far as we can tell. So, that's our exploration of the character of Trace Martez, the Clone Wars' newest fan-hated character. But what do you think, guys? Do you think our judgment was a bit too harsh or unfair? Do you agree with our judgment? Or are you a bit more harsh yourself? Let us know in the comment section below. And just before you go, guys, as per usual, make sure you check out all those juicy links in the description below waiting for your clicks. If you don't want to join our Geetsly's gaming network, we have our Roblox servers and our Gary's Mod servers where you can join other Star Wars gamers like yourself. We do have our main Discord where you can chat with other Star Wars fans, participate in polls, and chat to me when I'm on the server. And if you want to help support the channel more than you already are, please do check out the Patreon. If you do decide to donate, you get access to a special behind-the-scenes Discord that's exclusive to Patreons, where you can see how myself and my team works. Anyways, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.